Welcome to the VO School podcast, dedicated to the art, craft, and business of voiceover. Each week builds upon the last to give you a comprehensive understanding of a career in VO. My name's Jamie Muffett. I'm a full-time voice talent and audio engineer, and I'll be joined by some of the industry's top professionals on both sides of the microphone to drill down and dig up the truth. Hello. Welcome to the first episode, original episode, should I say, of 2018. And today this is also the first in a series of episodes devoted to voiceover genres. Over the course of the next year, we'll be scattering these in and covering areas such as commercial, promo, video game, narration, and many more. But this week, we are talking about audiobooks, and I have two extremely qualified guests on this week, which you'll hear in the bio, which is coming up shortly. Before we get there, if you'd like to connect with us, you can do so via our website, which has all of the links to our social media and the listening platforms, and that is voschoolpodcast.com. And I do encourage you to follow us on all those social media platforms and to please like and share and scream from the rooftops about this podcast and also to leave us a review. I don't badger you about this too much, but it really does help us to climb up the rankings in iTunes, which helps the podcast to grow. Okay, that's enough of me banging on, so let's get to the bios and straight into the interview after this short break. Thanks.
The National Zoo. Because sometimes you just need to stroke a llama.
Instagram. Download it and start embarrassing your teenagers today.
Resolve spot and stain. Because the dog's gonna drag his butt on the carpet. He just is.
Engage the droid army with this LEGO Star Wars Republic fighter tank.
Hi, it's J. Michael Collins, and these are just a few examples of the first-class demos my team and I are producing. If you'd like to have something similar, visit jmcvoiceover.com and click on the Demo Production tab to find out more.
Sean Pratt has been a working actor in theatre, film, TV and voiceovers for over 30 years, recording over 950 books in almost every genre. Sean has received 8 AudioFile Magazine Earphone Awards, 5 Audie nominations and 1 SOVAS nomination. He narrates for companies such as Blackstone Audiobooks, Tantor Media, Gildan Audio, Harper Collins, Penguin Random House and Christian Audio. Sean is also the author of To Be or Wanna Be, the top 10 differences between a successful actor and a starving artist. Johnny Heller is a narrator of over 500 audiobooks and specialises in adult, noir and mystery, personal development, history, comedy and children's book narrations. His awards and accolades include being the 2008, 2009 and 2011 Best Audiobook winner, a Publishers Weekly Listen Up Award winner from 2008 through 2013, a 2005 and 2009 Audie Award winner, one of AudioFile Magazine's top 50 narrators of the 20th century, and a multiple AudioFile Earphones Award winner. Here's our interview with Johnny Heller and Sean Pratt. All right, so today I am joined by Johnny Heller and Sean Pratt, who are both audiobook narrators and have narrated a ridiculous amount of books, I believe over 1,000 between them. So welcome to both of you.
Well, nice to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start out right at the beginning. So Sean, when and how did you become an audiobook narrator?
In 1994, I was down in Washington, D.C. doing some Shakespeare plays at the Shakespeare Theater of Washington, and I met an actor who recorded audiobooks, and we had a chat about what they were, and David Hilder was his name. He still does them on occasion. He said, if you ever happen to move down to D.C., give me a holler. I can introduce you to some people. And 2 years later, I did, and that was the beginning. In 96, I met a man named Grover Gardner, who's a real stalwart in our industry. And he sort of showed me the ropes, got a demo.
Pardon me, because this is over my Skyping over the phone, when little news feeds come up about Steve Bannon, it'll go.
Okay. Just keep us updated on all the news throughout
There
this
we go.
interview.
Yeah,
It'd be
right. All
great.
the fun stuff. Yeah, that's far more interesting what I have to say.
Apparently, he feels badly about what he said to Donald Trump. So
Yeah, I'm sure he does. So, so anyway, yeah, that was a start. He cut a little demo for me and shopped it around, and my first 2 clients were Blackstone Audio and Books on Tape, and that was 22 years and 950 books ago.
Oh, wow.
And I did it mainly because I was tired of hanging sheetrock. I was in between jobs. I just moved down to DC to sort of start my life and career over, and I'd lined up a bunch of theater work that all fell through at the last minute in '96. Right. And I didn't. Being a carpenter was sort of my day job in between acting gigs, and I didn't have a car in Northern Virginia, and I was a little panicked to say the least. And Grover came to my rescue, and. But, when I started, it was just going to be one more thing to add to, just one more venue to work in as a performer. When I grew up acting. I started acting when I was 10, went professional when I was 18. And so, you do a little, you work on a play for 3 weeks or 3 months, or you work on a television commercial for a day or on a movie for a week or whatever. And it's just, you're always looking for the next gig. And so I thought, well, yeah, audiobooks, I'll just add that to what I do. And I had no idea that I would end up really enjoying it so much.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Johnny, what about you? How did you begin?
Exactly the same way. No.
Same people, everything?
No. I was in New York, and I was here doing mostly commercial stuff. And I lived across the street from a fellow named Richard Ferrone, who you may have heard of. He's a wonderful audiobook narrator and very big in the union audiobook steering committee stuff. Anyway, he said recorded books. At this time, I didn't know much about the industry. This was, I think, early 90s probably. And Richard Ferrone said, listen, recorded books needs an adult who is kind of a juvenile delinquent and sounds like a kid and is very excitable. I think you may be that guy. So I am. So I went there and met with Claudia Howard, and they started having me do kids' books almost immediately. Oh. And so I became a regular thing, and then here I am, some 600 some odd books later. I still work at Recorded Books, doing the only things I think I do for them now are National Geographic for Children and the Horrible Harry series. But most of my work's in the adult market, not the dirty adult market, but the non-erotic adult market. So I started there, and it just kind of went. And to be honest, I wasn't aware how big it would be, what a large part of my life it would become, and how fortunate I really was, because the way I got in, and truly the way Sean got in, isn't really available for people anymore.
Well, we're going to get to that shortly, actually. My first business-related question here is to do with starting out, and I'm interested to find out if you have to have a certain temperament to do voiceover, audiobook in voiceover.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I use that word specifically. I tell people I get emails all the time because I coach privately. People find my email address and ask me, and they come from all walks of life, all ages, all countries, actually. I get people who do English as a second language kind of inquiries, and I tell them, I have a little test on my YouTube channel I tell them to go take. And basically, the test is go sit in a closet and read out loud for 3 hours a day for 2 weeks straight.
Right.
And do you have the temperament to sit in a little tiny space all by yourself, direct yourself in what you're doing, to stay that focused, eat the elephant one forkful at a time till you get through the other side of that book. And I've had friends who are extremely talented performers who would rather take a beating than do an audiobook because of that temperament issue. So
is it just stamina then, or are there other aspects?
Well, there's other things involved. Yeah, stamina is one of them. It's it's the biggest, to me, the first hurdle you have to overcome when you're working by yourself. Mm. Do you have the mental and vocal stamina to keep performing? Because what happens, of course, is as you get more tired, the narration, the energy, like Johnny's saying, an excitable guy sounds like an excitable kid. That takes a lot of energy to do. Yeah. To sustain that day after day after day for the listener, So yeah, stamina is a big deal.
Yeah. What about you, Johnny?
A couple of things. Yes, stamina is huge. It used to be, I recall, when people put together, because I coach as well, and people put together audiobook demos. I work on it all the time. And one of the things that used to be requested was one of your demo pieces had to be long to show that you had stamina. Well, all that really shows that you have the technical skill to do a 15 seconds on Tuesday and 15 seconds on Wednesday and glue it all together. But the actual job of the audiobook narrator, if you're in your home studio, let's say an ACX type of title where it's a deadline of 2 or 3 months down the road, you can actually do just an hour here or 20 minutes. You can do whatever you want. I think it ruins the flow. But if you get hired to do something in a studio, you're booked Monday to Friday, 10 to 5, and you're working. You're reading out loud. You're acting. You're performing. That whole chunk, it's much longer than a play, and it goes on and on and on. Stamina is a gigantic part, and it's not just physical stamina, but a joy for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if that's not there, I don't think you can do it because it's a hard job to do. And there's no residuals in the game, basically, unless you're doing royalty share. So once you get, let's say the minimum, let's say you make $200 a finished hour, 10-hour book, $2,000, however long it takes you, that's how much money you get. You don't get more than that.
So what does your day look like? How many hours are you putting in before you take a break? And, how many can you actually get in?
My day is different than many others, and I'm sure it would probably more similar to Sean's, except Sean's is probably much more scheduled. Joanna, my lovely wife, we're both late night people. So early in the morning is a hideous thing. Although when I arrive at studios at 9 or 10, I'm fine. I'm one of those people who wake up, greeting the new day with open arms. I'm one of those bounce out of bed in 2 seconds kind of guys that people hate. But my day generally is get up in the morning, do emails, do some writing, do some private stuff. Then it depends. Generally, if I have something scheduled, if I have a book to do, I make sure that Joanna, if she has a book to do, she'll do it in the evening, so I'll do mine in the day. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 books running, so we just have to schedule time in our single booth. We live in Manhattan, so we have a whisper room. So if we both have books, then we simply schedule who does what when. But basically, Joanna's going to work till all damn night, and I'm not gonna. So I got up in the morning, walk the dogs, have coffee. Generally what I'll do is I schedule my recording in a given day based on what else is going on. If I have students, I work out of Edge Studio in New York or Skype at home. I have that scheduled, so maybe I'll work an hour or so in the studio, then come out, do 2 hours with students, take a break, and come back in for a few hours. So I try and work it all out. It's okay with me if I want to do 4 hours or 5 hours in the studio. It's okay if I break them up.
Right.
As long as I don't break up the flow of the story.
Yeah. And you have to keep a track of, feeling like, noticing when you get tired or noticing if you lose that enthusiasm.
Absolutely. One of my big coaching things is as soon as your mind begins to wander. So there's a dog in the background, if you can hear that.
That's fine, it's good.
That's another thing that happens in a studio when you have dogs. You have to go out and, beat the dogs into submission. Or by giving them Milk Bone brand cookies or something. When my mind starts to wander, let's say I'm recording anything, and I start thinking, could use some rotisserie chicken for dinner, and it's like 11 in the morning. Well, then I would argue I'm not in touch with the author's truth, and I think it's important that all actors recognize when they're in and not in the moment. We always say acting is moment-to-moment acting. It is in an audiobook as well. But you're not feeding off other people's lines and the adrenaline of the stage performance. It's just you being everybody, telling the story. So if you begin to waver at all, then take a step out. Sometimes all you need to do is get out of the studio for a few moments. Yeah. Clear your head, do something, and then come back in, because the only person that loses in a scenario like that is the listener.
Yes. And
I'm very, very, very aware of when I'm not in the moment, even if I'm at someone else's studio. I'm going to be in Harper has me doing a book for Christopher Moore's new book called Noir, fabulous book that I'll be doing beginning February, and I'm booked 5 days in a studio. Well, in that 10 to 5 booking, that doesn't mean I'm speaking from 10 to 5.
Right. Yeah.
If I begin to lose my place, I said, guys, I need a break, and I'll get up and I'll walk out. It's okay. That's okay to do because it's my name on that book too, as well as Christopher Moore's, and I want to do a good job for everybody.
Yeah.
So an actor must always be sensitive and sensible to being involved with the author's truth moment to moment. And as soon as you lose that, you have to stop recording.
And presumably that's fairly unique to every person. They have their own sort of stamina and their own wall that they hit. So, yeah.
Well, no, P.J. Auckland could go forever, I think, and so can Sean.
Right.
Well, it gets the thing about biorhythm. During the day you have peaks and valleys when you're most on and when you get tired and so on. And part of learning, you have to learn when those happen, and also you have to learn how to manipulate them because, depending on if you have kids, you have to narrate in a certain window. When my kids were little, so that had to be my on time. So I had to learn how to be mentally and physically on, for those few hours they were at school. But normally now, my kids are grown, what I do is I teach in the morning. I teach on Skype from my office, and I do that in the morning because I have a lot of students in the UK now. And of course, for them, by the time I'm 9 o'clock here is 3 o'clock in the afternoon there.
Yeah.
So I have to accommodate people from England and across the United States. So I teach 2 or 3 students in the morning, more or less, and then I take a break because I'm tired, vocally tired from teaching, mentally tired from teaching. And so I go to the gym, I run some errands, take a nap, whatever, and then I get up in the mid-afternoon, and that's when I record again. So early in the morning and late in the afternoon are my best times of being awake, and that's when I can really focus. Because when I'm really on, we get paid by the finished hour, and where Johnny and I are at in our careers are that we record the material and we send it into the publisher and they proof it for us. Or if you're in the studio, they proof it right then. They're following along. But if we're working at our home studio, and so the more efficient you are when you're in your booth, the faster you can work and so on, stay connected, to the material. And so when I'm really on, when all the pistons are firing, my ratio is about 2 to 1, so 2 hours of work yields 1 hour of finished audio. Yeah. And so my goal, depending on the book, it depends on the schedule. Sometimes I want to get 1 hour done a day. Sometimes it's 2 hours done a day. Mm-hmm. So it all depends on what the deadline is for the project, and am I in good voice, or am I being distracted? Because sometimes you can be totally awake and ready to roll, but it just you have to learn to sort of hang your troubles at the door, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. But knowing when you're on, both mentally and vocally, is really, really important.
I'm really interested in, now this is a sort of side question here, it just was occurring to me as you guys were speaking then, that you have to really balance the two sides of your brain, the practical and the creative. Of course, you want to be absorbed in the book that you're reading, but then you have to keep all these sort of practical considerations going. And I wonder if you can talk about that sort of push and pull that happens.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think if you start examining it as separate functions, you begin to lose the ability to do it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it becomes, when we have a beginning student, Sean and I have taught together frequently, we have newer students, questions like that will come up. What happens actually is that you simply do it. A lot of what we suggest and a lot of what we're talking about here, becomes intuitive, becomes instinctual. And what you want to do is get from this question to making it happen. If I tell you what happens in your head, well, that I can pull it out for some science books I've done, and probably explain a little bit about what goes on when all the neurons are firing and all that other crap. But it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. Yeah.
What's really happening is you're either in the moment or you're not, and I would argue you know it. One of the clues to my discussion, my definition of an audiobook narration is presenting the author's truth to the listener. Be totally involved in that. So what I know happens is when you start thinking things that aren't in the script, there's a script and there's you and there's the audience. That's it, assuming your equipment works. So if something screws up, it's going to be you. And when your mind starts wandering away, then you're not in the moment to moment. And I think you know that. And one of the ways that you know that as an actor reading the text, narrating, telling the story, is that you begin to screw up simple words that you can normally say rather easily, like the and of and and all those things.
Man.
All of a sudden, you'll start screwing up on these simple conjunctive words, and he said, "What the hell's wrong with me?" And what's wrong with you is you're thinking about laundry, you're thinking about a million things that the author is not talking about, and it's natural. So what has to happen is not that you cease to do that, is that you recognize you're doing that. Mm-hmm. And that's why these little squiggly lines on our computer screen that indicate it's recorded words, you can erase some of those and go back and make new squiggly lines that are more on point.
Yeah.
What he said.
Right. Okay. Great. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
You know, the thing. There's a thing too is when I have a new student and a real newbie just getting into the industry, and they're still learning microphone technique. And what I say is that you go sort of through 3 stages dealing with working in the booth, because you're wearing all 4 hats at once.
Yeah.
Okay. You're the producer and the engineer and the director and the narrator all at the same time, and that's a lot to juggle at the same time. And then on top of that, you have to somehow pull a performance out. So you have to, I tell them to take it in stages. So the first thing they do is they learn to narrate without the equipment, just learning to read aloud and perform. And then you add in the director part. That's like directing, content and style and doing research. And then you add the element of the engineering, so learning the basics of recording. And they're not that hard to learn. Mm. And then when you learn all 3 of those and get those running, then you can add the producer hat, because then you can start to figure out, well, how long is it actually going to take me to do this book? Yeah. How many days of work? And when you're in there working initially, when I first started narrating, you're in there and there's this thing shoved right in your face, this microphone, and so you end up sort of talking at the microphone, like it's right there. Thump, 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 thump. It's in your face. And then the more you continue to narrate, eventually you learn to talk to the microphone, like it's a person almost. In fact, one of the transitions was I would take a picture of my wife and I would stick it on top of the microphone, or my mom or somebody to talk to, literally. Yeah. So I was talking to that person. Yeah. If it works, it works.
Whatever works.
And
absolutely.
I had pictures of Johnny, but they kept I take him down from my dartboard. And then eventually you get to a point with it where you forget the microphone's there, so you're sort of talking through the microphone right to the audience, and the microphone just disappears. Yeah. And so that's when I know I'm in flow, as they say. I've achieved that mental state. And of course, over the years, that gets easier and easier to get to. Mm-hmm. And it's also easier to realize when you're out of it, not to grind metal, as it were, to keep powering on because you think you have to. And Johnny's right. If I start to lose my focus, I'll get up, go for a walk around the block, get some fresh air, come back in. And I'm far more efficient that way, having taken that 5 or 10 minutes than to come back in or as opposed to trying to grind forward. You just have that little mental and physical break really does pay off.
It's interesting how our techniques are so similar, because I also have a photo of Sean's wife on my mic.
Oh, wow. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So presumably after 500 to 700 audiobooks, a few of those responsibilities become second nature. You don't really have to think about them.
One would hope, yes. The whole process actually is when you break it down into the moment-to-moment decisions and choices and things you do, it sounds like an arduous list of tasks.
Yeah.
Like the tasks of Hercules or something, but it's not Herculean at all. It's really basic acting. Mm-hmm. One of the things that bother, I know both of us, is when people say, "Oh, you do a lot of voiceover. Are you still acting?" Like, well, screw you. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what this is. This is the most organic acting experience I know, besides having an empty stage and an audience and just winging it. That's what this is. It's moment to moment acting, exactly like those of us who trained and worked hard for. I was going to do Shakespeare forever, making no money at all. Now I'm doing audiobooks, making some money at all. So but it's still the same process, the same technique. Not everyone writes as well as Shakespeare, but there you go.
One thing I did recently was actually I was watching a TV show. I can't remember what it was. It was a fiction show, and I closed my eyes and was just listening to the performance. And without the visuals, it sounded so flat, you know. So what people I don't think realize with particularly fiction audiobooks is that you have to give almost 110% because you only have the audio side to present to people.
Don't forget, though, that when you shut your eyes while watching a film or a television program, it's a bit of a disservice to the acting because there's different techniques involved and on camera and on stage than in audiobooks.
Yeah.
And part of what happens for the audiobook actor in a fiction piece, when you're playing this character, that character, and the other characters, for me, and I think for the successful people in this industry, fiction or nonfiction, it is very visual. Mm-hmm. It sounds like simply an oral exercise, but I view my job to be something akin to a cinematographer. The author paints the picture with words, and that's what I'm using. And I see the scene he describes. I hear the character speak, and I'm merely relating that story as I view it in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's all pictorial to me. It's all visual. It's all the cinematographer art, I think, that is translated to an audible art. And I think that's the key for doing this really well consistently, is that you see the story.
For myself, first of all, when you get back to the film thing, never forget that it is a slightly different kind of VO. When you watch a documentary and you shut your eyes, the voice in a documentary is there to support the picture. Mm-hmm. Okay? When you look at when you actually look at a shot sheet for a documentary, they have A roll and B roll. The A roll is what you're seeing on the screen. The B roll is, the A roll is the voice, the actual, the narrator. The B roll is the visual, right? So the idea is that, you know, the narrator on the thing, you know, and now the zebras are coming up to the waterhole here on the Serengeti, right? And that's all you need,
this in
right?
a 6-iron.
Exactly. So you got it. So you know, or that show How It's Made is a perfect example. Yeah. If that guy was any more relaxed, he'd be in a coma. But all he needs to do is tell you, and now the oven, you know, goes into the oven at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. And you see what's happening. So all he's doing is providing just an extra little bit of information. He's there to support the picture. But when you have an audiobook, you have no visuals. In fact, I always remind my students that when 99% of the time when someone's listening to an audiobook, they are doing something else. They are driving to work, they're folding laundry, they are cooking dinner or whatever. And so you have to compete, and we're visual animals to begin with, so you have to compete against whatever it is they're doing to grab their attention. So it's a heightened state of performance. And so like Johnny, and because my niche in the industry is nonfiction, I see that particular audience that I'm narrating to. They're right there in whatever construct I create. So I see them and I'm reaching out to them. So yeah, it's very much a visual exercise.
Absolutely. I love that. So I want to explore vocal qualities now. Do you have to have any specific vocal qualities to do audiobooks?
If you speak English.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, unless you're doing, you know, some sort of Scandinavian titles for Scandinavians. But, you know, here's the thing. You don't need to have... People say all the time, people tell me I have a wonderful voice, you know, when you do the audiobooks. Well, you know, first you don't, and your friends are lying to you. And second, it's not the quality of the voice, it's the ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
That's the craft. So the things you have to have, fiction or nonfiction, is a clear sound, some reasonably good diction so people can understand word after word. And you have to have an understanding of and a love of, I think, the English language, because that becomes your artist palette, if you will. Mm. But other than vocal quality, I'm not sure it matters that much.
No, in fact, sometimes the quirkier voices really are the ones that that really come through. I mean, I think Johnny has a quirky, great voice. He's got an amazing voice. I've never heard anybody like Johnny, right?
Nope.
And so having a unique voice can help you. but there's other issues like, do you have a diction problem? Do you have a breathing problem? Do you have, those things can be fixed. But there's another sort of misnomer people have about, they think that only people who have beautiful voices can be, voiceover talents or audiobook narrators. And that's just not the case. It's like Johnny says, it's your storytelling ability. I've heard plenty of audiobooks and met people who are voice talents who have that beautiful, amazing voice, but they aren't good storytellers. And that's why people, it's been my experience, they don't do so well in the long run because they may have an amazing sound, but they don't know how to use it to tell the story.
Right.
It doesn't serve the story.
And there's also the danger of the really skilled voiceover person, the person with that great, deep, resonant sound, who merely uses their voice as opposed to acts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have certain ability, and I think one of the problems for the voiceover person is that they tend to let their little vocal quirkiness or skills or differences do the job as opposed to actually acting the moment to moment.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're doing, then that's a disservice, and I don't think you're doing I don't think you're giving 100%. I think you're giving like 30.
Yeah. I used to run into that when I was doing Shakespeare. You'd find some actor who's got this amazing, or actress has an amazing voice, real great resonance, and they're saying the thing and doing the thing on stage, and it sounds great, but ultimately it's very limiting because they're relying on that to get them through.
Yeah.
And I don't. It's like I don't have a strong voice in that sense. I've learned microphone technique over the years. But I don't have I guess I have a very smooth voice or a very generous kind of voice. But I don't have a very hard-edged voice or a very powerful voice. But I make up for that by the fact that I can really get inside the story and tell it.
You sound like a very friendly grandmother, I think.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Sonny. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting here to me that, we may get onto the technical side if we have time, but what we keep coming back to is the acting side and the performance. So you're both coaches, so you may be slightly biased with this question, but do you need specific audiobook training, or would general acting training be a better course, at least when you're starting out, would you say?
I found that the audiobook training is really about, like I said, if someone approaches me and has no experience with audiobooks whatsoever, I always tell them to go take the test on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to find out very quickly if they have the temperament to do it. So let's say they pass that. I have them fill out a questionnaire and I look at their background. It's been my experience again and again that those people who come from a performance background, theater actors, film actors, they're already able to do that magic to put themselves as a storyteller. So they have a huge leg up. Mm-hmm. People who have no acting training whatsoever and no VO training whatsoever, I tend not to take because it's going to be, because this is very difficult. It's not doing a 15-second commercial.
Yeah. And
it's a much more nuanced, and the stamina issue comes into play as well. So, performers definitely have a leg up over non-performers when it comes to audiobooks.
Right.
I am not at all certain that you have to have an official acting background. On the other hand, I did and do, and Sean did and does, and how's that right? Anyway,
yeah.
I went too far there. The point is this. The job is an actor's job.
Yeah.
The only way around that, and it really isn't a way around it, it's simply another way of saying it, if you're a gifted storyteller, you don't necessarily, not every actor went to acting school.
Yeah.
I will say, however, that every actor who's worth their salt has learned acting as they moved along. You have certain people who are alleged, stars, who can act out of a paper bag, Shia LaBeouf or people like that, who I just don't think anything of. And there's he may surprise me and do something good. I can't imagine that. But there are many actors we see on television or film. You say, how the hell did they get that gig? How come so and so's a star? Why is Ben Affleck a star? I don't know. But there they are. So, but did he study acting? I don't know. But I do think that the more you know about the acting craft, I think one of the things I do tell people, if they have no background at all, And if they maybe have some ability, some skill level, I always suggest they get into an improv workshop class or a basic scene study class, because one of the things that really gets in the way for an adult pursuing audiobook narration work is we still have all these inhibitions. Acting is make-believe. Acting is making choices. As adults, we tend not to make believe anymore. When you and I, we three boys, are kids, we can be Batman, Wonder Woman, and Catwoman, and it doesn't matter who's who, it's fine. We don't have any gender issues. We don't have any black or white issues. We have nothing like that. We just play. Mm-hmm. As we get older, all those issues creep in, and so we start to stop ourselves. And I think acting workshops, scene studies, improv means just say yes. If I set up the scene, here we are in a gas station, that's where we are. Sean can say, no, we're in a zoo. That's not improv. You know what I mean? So I think once you start studying things like that and losing some inhibitions and accepting the situation in which the author or whoever it is puts you in, you become better able to handle acting choices. So I think it's more beneficial to have been from an acting background, but not mandatory.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Johnny. In fact, one of the things I do, if I take on a student who doesn't have a performance background, because sometimes by the time a student comes to me, even though they don't have a performance background, they've been working on ACX and they've done 5, 10, 15, 20 books. They just took the plunge. And I'm like, you know what? If you've done that many books, then you're already in the trenches with it, and so you're ready to be coached. But I insist that those particular students look around and try and take an acting 101 or an improv class in their local community, because I said, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's still about acting. Yeah. And so anything, if you approach the class with a sense of fun and discovery and just you're not going to, I said, look, I'm not trying to train you to be the next Olivier on the stage. I'm saying this will open you up to more, you'll bring more stuff to the microphone when you come back to your work. So, and every so often you'll just get a natural, I think Johnny can speak to this too, is that every so often I'll get someone has no experience, but I'll have them do some stuff for me. And they're just a great storyteller. They have a great voice. They have a great sense of storytelling. They connect with the text. They have a sense of technique. And you're like, I can't say no to that. And that's another thing I've learned too is when I take when I first started coaching, to my own detriment, sometimes I would judge a student like, I don't think they're going to do well in the end. To myself, of course, I would never say that to them. Yeah. But now I've learned I don't do that, because I've had students really surprise me. Someone I'm like, well, they might be okay. That something happens, they click with their technique and their skill, and they just take off. Yeah. And so the one thing I've learned as a teacher, and this is obviously different than being a narrator, but as a teacher, is don't judge your students on that level. They will surprise you. If they put in the time and the effort, they're going to get better. And that's a wonderful thing to watch happen.
Yeah, great. I could talk about the acting thing all day, but I do have to get to some of the nuts and bolts of the business side as well. How do you find your first job? ACX has been brought up a couple of times in this conversation. What is that? And maybe not from your own experience, because things have changed somewhat over the last few years, but maybe experience you've had through your students. How do people actually get started doing this today?
Assuming that they're ready to work, okay?
Yeah.
Which is different than just jumping in and not succeeding. Assuming there's an ability and a talent and a skill level.
And the equipment and the space to record.
Yeah,
don't forget
there's
that.
all kinds of things. So assuming that all the pieces are in place, they're ready to work.
Yeah.
ACX is, what's it called? Audiobook Creation Exchange? What's it called?
Yeah.
Okay,
Audio Creative Exchange.
If we look at the world of publishing, and we say that in a given year, 10 to 15% of the books that are written will be picked up by the major publishers, and the majority of those turn to audio because audio is booming now. Mm-hmm. That still leaves a vast percentage that are not published and or put out in audio. And those numbers fluctuate given year to year, but basically there's the larger percentage of books written in a given year because they're crappy books or just not interesting or or the writer's bad or something, may not get picked up by a publisher. Doesn't mean they won't get sent off on audio. Sometimes if Sean wrote a book and he wants to put it out there and Harper or Simon & Schuster don't pick it up. So Sean wants it out there as an audiobook. He's the rights holder. He can put it on ACX, and he can have auditions, and Jamie, you and I can audition to be it, and he can pick one of us. We then become the producer.
Right.
Okay, Sean picks me to do his book, the Sean Allen Pratt story, My Life in Snuff Films. It's a short story. So he picks me to do it. So I'm going to do the book, and I've got 2-3 months, and I'm going to put it out there. So now, and then there's the ways that he's either going to pay me. There are different numbers, salaries you can put, 0 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 200, I think, something like that. That's per finished hour.
Yeah.
Or it can be a royalty share, which means if Sean's book is going to sell well, that he and I, it used to be 50% went to Amazon because they need that kind of money, and then Sean and I would each get 25% each. Then Amazon really did well and said, we need more money than that. So now they take 60%, and Sean and I get 20-20. But if it's a good-selling book, you can, like, I've only got 5 or 6 books in ACX, and I probably pull down $300 to $500 a month on the books.
Right.
Which is great, and I have for a number of years because I did Tom Sawyer for one. I'm Huck Finn, so that's going to do well.
Yeah.
If you pick the right book, like the Sean Snuff story, you should probably do very well in the snuff market. Very big. A lot of huge fans of Sean.
It's in rewrites.
Films.
It's in rewrites. Come on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. My life in recurring roles in snuff films. So anyway, the only guy who makes it film to film. So anyway, so there it is. So that's what, and there's other companies that are like that. For example, Findaway just signed a union contract. They have a similar deal where authors bring their work to them, or they reach out to authors. Let's say I discover Sean has a book, and I say, Sean, I can get this thing done in audio. There's a book. So I reach out to the author, and I work a deal out. We bring it to ACX, Findaway, or my dear friend and Sean's Stephen J. Cullen runs Spoken Realm Audio, which not only has these royalty share deals and options, they have hybrid deals too, where there can be part finished hour and part royalty share. So there are many options. So the way for the newer actor to get some work is, first off, this is very important, do not do crappy books just to do books.
Right.
Because then you become known as the guy with crappy books.
Right. Yep.
Don't be that guy. Pick books that you want to do, that are decent, that you like, that there's something in it for you as well. If you make money, that's great. That should be the idea because you're going to spend time and money on it. Don't do books that aren't going to sell. The history of dirt, that may not sell well. Don't do that. Sean's snuff book will sell better. I'll tell you what sells well is erotica and romance. And, of course, Christian books. If you can do a zombie, lesbian, Christian romance, I think you do pretty well. Yeah, that's a seller right there.
Right.
Matt, we should write
I'm writing
that.
this afternoon.
That's so I think Sean would agree that you want to get in those things and or put together a kick-ass, get some nice demo links on your website.
Yeah.
And then reach out to producers and casting people, sending the link to your website. And there's a whole technique about how to do that as well. I've been talking a while. I apologize. Sean's turn.
No, that's all right. No, the thing to remember, you have to have a studio that's of a certain quality, equipment that's of a certain quality. So, because if you do a recording through ACX and it's crappy, they'll reject the recording. Yeah. So it pays to work with. When I set up my latest studio in a new space, I hired an engineer to come in and work with me to test my sound, get the noise floor correct, all the specs correct. And then I sent that out to all my clients and said, listen to this. Is this okay? And they all said yes, so we're off and running. And so first you have the quality issue. The second thing you're going to be dealing with to find work is ACX is the place to get started. Because the analogy I like to draw is theater. When I got to New York in 90 to be a theater actor, you're like, oh, I want to work on Broadway. And you go and you talk to someone who works on Broadway, like, well, you got to work off Broadway before they'll look at you on Broadway. So you try to get on to off Broadway and they go, no, you have to work off Broadway first. So you go to off Broadway and you do, summer stock theater for $100 a week. And in a lot of ways, ACX is like that initially. You have to think of it as working for free in that sense for your community theater, for summer stock work. You're going to work your butt off. You're really not going to make any money. But you need the experience. You need the credits on the resume, because ultimately the bigger publishers will not look at you until you amass a certain number of titles. I mean, there's always a caveat. There's always that one person who can get through, but they do that because they can now, because there are so many people who want to get into audiobooks. So, it might be 30, 40, 50 titles before Random House or Tantor or Brilliance takes you seriously, because they can set that bar higher and higher until they get what they want. That being said, like Johnny referred to, pick good material to work on. But not initially anyway, as a newbie, picking quality material is important. Whether or not you get paid a lot of money is not. You need the experience. Johnny and I could, when Johnny was doing, stand-up comedy for $5 a set, you start out from the bottom and you work your way up. That's just the way it goes. You have to pay your dues. You need the experience. But eventually you can start to audition for per finished hour things on ACX. Now, just know that as you do that, you'll be competing against other narrators who have a larger resume than you do, and they might be taken more seriously by the author. But you can also just strike out. I mean, after you get enough experience, if one of the things I walk my students through and show them how to do once they have an audiobook resume and some other marketing materials is simply going on Amazon.com and looking around for books that haven't been produced as audiobooks and just basically doing a pitch, as you'd say.
Right.
Hi, this is me. I'm an audiobook narrator. I saw your book on Amazon. I think it's a great title. I'd love to open a conversation with you about perhaps being the producer for the audiobook version. We can sell it on Audible through ACX, and here's my resume and here's a demo and so on. So you can evolve, but it does take time. And this is the other thing about for a lot of people wanting to get into audiobooks is that they come from, some of my students call them muggles. They come from a corporate, small c corporate background. They worked for a company, they worked for whatever that was, and there was a structure there. They go to work, they have a boss, the boss gives them assignments, they get a quarterly review. If they get that, they get a raise in a corner office or whatever. But there was a hierarchy and a structure for their efforts. And of course, when you get into the show business, there's none of that. No. None of it. And a lot of people just can't deal with that. I field questions all the time from beginners saying, well, if I work really hard and do everything you tell me to do, how much money do you think I'll make next year? And I always say I have the same answer. I said, I can't tell you that. I said, you can work your butt off for a year and make $1, or work your butt off for 6 months and make $10,000. And I say, but listen to this. Anyone who guarantees you a certain amount of money after a certain amount of time, if you work with them, you need to get up and leave that room because they're going straight for your wallet. Yeah. And so initially for new narrators, to me, the emphasis is on experience, doing material that's at least passable. It may not be great. It ain't all Hemingway, that's for sure. But at least you're going to learn and you're going to build your resume. You're going to make connections. You'll get to know people. We have a lot of groups on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn now where you can talk with other narrators, gain knowledge from their experience, and then slowly begin to develop that inertia that moves you forward. But you have to be patient. I've had even some of my students who, they might have last year might be a great year, but this year might be terrible for them. Welcome to show business. Yeah. That's also part of the gig.
There are also workshops being done frequently. For example, Sean and I are working with Scott Brick out in L.A., January 27th on the business of audiobooks.
They call that a tease in the industry. Yeah.
Well, so I'm doing it. Sean, I do the one of the biggest things happening is APAC, the Audio Producers Association Convention, May 30th in New York City. And the day before, interestingly enough, is the Johnny Heller Splendiferous Narrator Workshop. I think this is the 4th year in a row, and we do almost 200 people with different panelists talking about things. One of the two things that I'm going to jump off from what Sean said before we have to end this is, one, if you're going to reach out to an author and take them to Spoken Realms or Findaway or ACX, then you need to understand how those things work.
Yeah.
Because the author may not, and if you don't, then you're not going to have a successful pitch. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is, once you have some links to good demo pieces on your website, and you have to have that, you need that, you can reach out to casting people from Tantor, from Blackstone, from Simon Schuster, from Penguin Random House. But if you reach out and say, listen, I want you to listen to my demos, and your demos suck.
Yeah.
Let's say they'll do it because that's part of what they do for a living. Wednesdays 11 till lunchtime, we're listening to people's stuff.
Right.
If they say, I'll listen to Sean's right now, and they go, oh my God, that's awful. Now, let's say Sean's new, and it is awful, but later on, he's going to be great. They're going to remember that he's awful.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reach out to have people take a listen or look at your work if it isn't up to snuff yet.
That was going to be my next question.
Well, there you go.
I know we do have to wrap it up shortly. Is do publishers accept unsolicited? So, I'm presuming now that maybe someone's worked a little bit on ACX, they've got a few books under their belt, they've done some training, they've got the studio set up. How do you make that leap, like you say, to that maybe 10 to 15% of published work? How do you jump into that?
There will be, many of your books will be reviewed, sadly, on Audible by listeners. My feeling is kind of like on Yelp. You don't have an acting background to say that you think so-and-so sucks as a narrator. I've heard some of the reviews people put on Audible are just vicious. But you see that the quotes they have are generally either the best or the shittiest quotes in the world. Can I say that? I'm saying it.
Yeah.
But generally, let's say the book has 4 stars across, and your performance is 4 stars. That's what's important. 3 stars and up tends to be worthwhile for publishers to look at. Understand that the casting people at the different publishers have a job to find and nurture new talent, as well as keep the old guys happy. So they're not against hearing you at all. You can meet them at APA, Audio Producers Association Mixers. You'll meet them at APAC if you go. They're online frequently, so you can find them in a lot of these groups that Sean mentioned on Facebook and stuff. They're very active. Most of them are younger. You can reach out to them. They'll find out who you are a little bit. You can reach out to them. That's their job. So the way to get to the next level is 2. 1, reach out to them in the way that you'd like to be reached out to, where the table's turned.
Yeah.
Understand what they do. How would you like it? Make sure it's that. Don't just send, hi, I'm really great. There are obviously stupid things to do and smart things to do. And we don't have time to go through the whole marketing way to do it. But there are methods, and you don't have to have 52 books to get a job with Simon Schuster. If you're the right voice, you're the right voice.
Yeah.
And generally, when they start listening to Sean or Johnny or James, whoever, they may have I need a voice for this particular story. They say, I like Sean's voice, I like Johnny's voice. Both are too light. I'm looking for more a James Earl Jones sound. It doesn't mean they don't like Sean and don't like Johnny. It just means we're not the voice in their head right now.
Yeah.
And you, the actor, can never know that. If I say, don't forget the actor's job is to hear no more than any other position in the world.
Yeah.
We don't bat 300. We bat 180. So that's just the way it is. So it doesn't mean you're not good. It means you're not the voice they're looking for right now. It doesn't mean you didn't make an impression.
And it's not personal. And that's the thing too. It's not personal. You say, how do you have a thick skin in this business? I don't think I have necessarily a thick skin. I just understood very early on acting. It's like, well, I didn't get the job because they weren't looking for a really tall, redheaded guy to play that role, or vice versa. Sometimes you ultimately don't know the final criteria by which you are being judged in show business for a role. I was once up for a part in a movie that I got. It was between me and this other guy, and the other guy was hunkier and sexier looking.
No,
I know, it's hard to believe, but it came down. I'm not kidding you. The reads were the same, everything was the same, and what I found out later, the reason he didn't get the part was that he had a lazy left eye, and every so often it would wander. So for the close up on camera, it was bothering the producer. He said, "I can't use this guy."
Yeah.
So ultimately, it came down to a lazy left eye. And so, but here's the thing: he didn't know that.
The title of your autobiography.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The one that Johnny's going to record for me after the snuff film biography. And and so you have to learn. The job of a performer. And this is also with audiobooks. Your job is auditioning.
Yeah.
So you better like it, and you better learn how to do it really well, because performing is the icing on the cake. It really is. And Johnny and I still audition for material. You'll get a savvy author who has that in their contract. It's like, well, I want to pick the narrator. And so Blackstone or Penguin Random House will say, okay, we'll pick from one of these 5 guys for this thing. We still audition for material. Now, granted, we get a lot of just offers because with our regular clients, because they know our body of work and they know our sound, and that's okay. But you do the audition and you forget about it. You go right to the next audition. Do that one. Focus on that one to make that the best audition possible, and then move on to the next one. And eventually, it's a numbers game. Eventually, one of them's going to click, and you're going to get that gig. And you're going to then you work as hard as you can on that gig to learn from it and to become a better performer. But even while you're working on the gig, you're still auditioning for the next thing. You're always looking for work. I always tell people, I've lost every job I've ever had as a performer because they all end. Yeah. The play closes, the movie wraps, the book goes to the end, and that's it.
Always be closing.
Yes. Always be closing.
Yeah. And I think these are truisms in the whole industry and voiceover and acting and everything, really. I mean, the whole entertainment industry.
Yeah, there's nothing new about that. I mean, so I would say, and you were talking about the business end of it too, it's, make sure, if you're going to get on ACX, then take the time and listen to, this is across a couple of things. A person getting into it should subscribe to AudioFile Magazine. I suggest getting the physical copy so you can read it wherever you're at. And look for those books that have the Earphones Award. So that's an internal award the magazine gives to really good recordings. So at least you have a pretty good idea that recording was a pretty darn good one to listen to as an audiobook. Then when you go onto ACX, if you type in the name of a narrator they might be on there. Go to their profile. It's open. It's free. Listen to their demos. What did you hear? Analyze it.
We should say, Sean, to get into ACX, if you want to check it out, if you've ever ordered from Amazon, that is your password for ACX.
Yes, that's true, because they're owned by Amazon. Yes. And so, you don't, you can go on. You don't even have to join. You can just go on and look through stuff and listen, just to gain experience. I tell my students all the time, listen to these other demos. What did you hear? What did you like? What didn't you like? What impressed you? What caught your attention? And you also look at the other information provided and the way they structure it. And, and like Johnny said too, it's like you also go to these networking events, like Johnny's Splendiferous Workshop's an amazing event, mainly because he has me involved in it, but that's a different story. So, but
don't be killing your chickens, pal.
So, but yeah, I mean, there are no college classes for this, so you're also going to need training. A lot of the training, and a fair amount of the training, frankly, you can learn to do on your own in the sense of listening to audiobooks. There's plenty of YouTube videos about technique and things out there. There's also some really very good coaches out there, depending on what kind of thing you want to study. So let's say you want to work on accents. So you might, find somebody like Joel Frumpkin or PJ Auckland, or let's say you want to do fiction, a certain kind of, so there's plenty of teachers like that, like Johnny and Scott Brick and Carol Monda and so on. My little specialty is I do nonfiction. That's what I like to teach. It's like I like to do. But you're going to need some coaching eventually because, unless you're going to be an autodidact. Now, granted, Johnny and I are autodidacts. We taught ourselves how to do this way back then. But the world was different 20 some odd years ago. Right. The pressure wasn't on to be turning out this material as quickly as possible.
I have to look that up now.
It's your word for the day, Johnny. And the pressure wasn't on, and there were just fewer people trying to get into the industry. So there was, so we had a little more breathing room to learn organically how to do this thing.
Yeah.
And but it is, I say it's doable. Heck, if Johnny and I can learn how to do it, as performers, just walking in off the street, as it were, if you've got the determination and focus, you can learn how to do it too.
And for those listening at home, autodidact means a self-taught person.
I taught Johnny how to use his phone too. So.
No, I did it on the computer.
That's very helpful. That's great.
I'm going to put it on my business card. Johnny Hiller, autodidact.
That was like a great way to end it with a little factoid at the end there. But this has been such a useful information-filled episode, and I do have like 500 more questions to ask. But I know it's a Sunday for everyone listening, so I need you to get back to enjoying
Football.
your day off. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can have another one of these in a few months' time.
Absolutely.
And we can get into some other subjects. But so for today, thank you, Johnny Heller and Sean Pratt, for joining me. Do you guys have anything you would like to plug? I know you've done a little bit of plugging already, so go ahead.
Well, as I mentioned, the January 27th in L.A., for those of you who are in the Phoenix area, I'll be speaking at the Tucson Wilmot Library on February, 8th or 9th, whatever the Friday is, at 2 o'clock. Yeah. And then Sean and I both, not only are available online and through easy to find on Facebook and things, we both have many workshops we put out. Sean actually just came back from London in December. We worked together in the UK. It was a wonderful time. So do look out for upcoming workshops from both of us, either together or individually, because we tend to do a lot of traveling around. So we may be coming to wherever town you're in.
Yeah, and the way to find us, Johnny has, you can find us on Facebook. We have spots there for both of us. And, of course, we're both online. I'm at SeanPrattPresents.com. You can find me on Twitter, SP Presents. And as far as upcoming workshops are concerned, I'm going down to Texas in February. I'm doing a class in Dallas on the 16th and one in Austin on the 19th. And but more than that, in just a couple of weeks, I'll be with Johnny and our friend and colleague Scott Brick in Los Angeles, doing as part of a big panel roundtable business of audiobooks in Los Angeles. We're really looking forward to that.
And if you want to join the Johnny Heller Alumni Workshop Facebook group, you can ask to join that group. Having heard this exciting thing, I'll put you in there.
All right, great, fantastic. All right, well, thank you to both of you for all that. It was fact-filled and entertaining as well. So what more could you want?
That's right.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So there we are. How much fun was that? Thank you very much to Sean and Johnny, who were very good value for money in that interview. Very funny and very entertaining, and bring an extraordinary amount of wealth of knowledge to the discussion. I said in the interview, they have over 1,000 books between them, which is just incomprehensible, really. So, as I said at the start, please follow us on social media, and you can find all those links on our website, voschoolpodcast.com. Next week, we are having our brand audit session, which is a follow-up on the marketing and branding episode that we had at the end of last year. And a listener to the show, Marissa Blake, is going to be interviewed by Celia Siegel, who is a marketing and branding expert, and we're going to be able to listen in to the process. And I'm not going to elaborate any more than that because it's a really fascinating listen, and I think everyone will get a lot out of it. So that's really exciting. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the interview, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. All right, thanks very much. I'll speak to you soon. Bye. Thank you to this week's guests, to our sponsor J. Michael Collins and Backstage Magazine. Thanks also to Kyle Marie Colucci and Chris Sharps for social media support. Join us next time for another class.